Everyone, welcome to this Power Maths webinar. Hope you can hear me okay, and I'm going to share my screen now as well. Welcome to this webinar. We're going to give you more detail about the new additions for Power Maths. You can see lots of people joining as I speak, which is good. Let me give you something to look at. Okay, so welcome to the webinar. I'm Simon Holden-White, Senior Product Manager at Pearson, and I'm going to top and tail the session today. And Tony Staneff is here as well. He's our series editor for Power Maths and author as well. Tony's worked with Josh Lurie to tweak and update Power Maths. So he's the perfect person to give some examples and detail around what's different with the new additions. And I'm sure that that's what all of you have been most looking forward to in today's session. By the way, I know there'll be some participants who aren't using Power Maths yet. I'm sure this session is going to be useful for you, but we won't be doing a full product walkthrough or anything like that. So best to follow up with one of the partnership managers afterwards if that's you. Okay. Here's our agenda for today then. Session will finish by 5, maybe a bit early. First of all, I'm going to give a bit of background context. Why change Power Maths at all? And secondly, a reminder of the timeline or roadmap that we're working to for the updates that we're making. Then it'll be over to Tony to explain changes to the progression. So, for example, changes to units within the year, changes to lessons within the units, that kind of thing. And then also what will look different at lesson level in the new edition of Power Maths. And Tony's going to address point 5 here as well, which is using Power Maths and White Rose Maths resources together. We know lots of schools are doing that, so hopefully you'll find that useful. And then I'm going to come back on to do number 6, which is how are you going to decide what's best for your school? Because of course, we're giving you a choice about which edition you could be using in the next academic year. And there'll be a poll at the end, which is going to ask you what you plan to do. That's going to be really interesting for us. And we'll also answer your questions, whether we do that in the session or whether we do it as follow-up. And can you see in your Zoom panel a Q&A box? So you can use the Q&A box to send us a question if you want to, any point. I guess the aim of the session then is that afterwards you feel you can choose the best approach for your school in terms of the materials for September and beyond September as well. So what are we doing with Power Maths? We've worked in partnership with White Rose Maths to create a new edition of Power Maths that's fully aligned with the new White Rose Maths schemes of learning. So I know Tony's calling them 3.0, or on the White Rose website, they're the schemes of learning 3.0. So the progression and the content has been updated. The Power Maths progression and content has been updated wherever we thought it could be improved based on your feedback. So it does mean that there are new books. Those are some new examples of covers. Don't they look nice? They need to be distinguishable from the current book. So we decided to call them White Rose Maths editions, which you can see on there. We've also incorporated the colour from the White Rose Maths schemes, as well as the Power Maths year group colour. So you've got the purple on there and the green on there for year 4. All the digital content for the new editions will be available for Power Maths users on Active Learn, and those are free updates. So they're available alongside the current content on Active Learn. So we've given you the choice. There's no problem at all with carrying on with the current editions. And that means nobody has to spend more than they would have anticipated. They'll all have the digital content if you're Power Maths users on Active Learn. So you can always evaluate the changes over time. You can look in at the digital versions of the resources over time and sort of think about changing later if that's the way that you play it. the choice is yours, and we'll sort of come back to that point about how you might want to make the decision. I'm going to click through this one. I think that the text on this slide I can probably just as easily as explain using this slide. So why make changes to Power Maths? From talking to customers, I know so many of you really love Power Maths. That doesn't mean that you don't suggest potential improvements, and we've very much been taking those on. I'm going to be slightly indisciplined and sort of dive in at the 8 o'clock position here about individual practice games, just because this is a new thing. So have you seen the individual practice games which were launched last week on Active Learn? So these are to help you build in extra fluency and retrieval practice. It doesn't matter, by the way, which edition you follow. This is a free update for everybody on Active Learn. So it's not really related to the new edition. There's a 30-second video which was posted in the latest news feed on Active Learn. You might have seen that. But even if you haven't, you can look on Active Learn now or after the session. You can look at the resources page, and there's a new resource type called individual practice games, or you can click into a unit within the planning area and then scroll down to the bottom of the unit below the lessons, the links to the lessons, and then you'll see individual practice games that are linked to that unit. So there are 480 of these games for year 1 to 6. Children can play them in the pupil world. So they log into the pupil world to play them. They can do that at home. They can do it in school. So they're quite flexible. And so that's a new thing I just wanted to mention. And another new thing, something else that people asked about a lot in our most recent survey was lesson footage. So we're creating PowerPoints with lesson footage built in so that you can run sessions with your staff for all the different parts of the lesson. So discover, share, and so on. And those will be ready for next term. Again, those will be in Active Learn. So now we're going to talk about the things that are more sort of features of the new edition of Power Maths. So I'm going to start at the 12 o'clock position. So the new editions are fully aligned with the new White Rose schemes. Clearly, Power Maths has been aligned with White Rose Maths already, that there's been sort of minor divergence over time. With the new edition, we'll be fully aligned with the new White Rose schemes. Since we published Power Maths, NCTM, DFE Maths Hubs have all continued giving guidance to schools around mastery. We've been able to take all of that on board and then make sure that the Power Maths new edition is absolutely cutting edge in terms of mastery, teaching for mastery. And we've updated the progressions. Sometimes you said to us in your feedback that a unit could be a little bit quick or a little bit slow or whatever. So that's something that we've been able to take on board with the new editions. We've also been able to build in more fluency, which is something that comes up. And we've also looked at how we can make the pupil materials easier for independent use. So looking at things like the number of answer boxes and the way that they're laid out in the pupil materials, squared paper backgrounds, that kind of thing. Tony will show you a bit of that in a minute. If you teach mixed age, if you've got a mixed age class, you'll find that the main yearly overviews in the new editions are more closely aligned across year groups. So that's something else that we've tried to do to be helpful according to your feedback. And we've made incremental improvements as well to the accessibility of the pages, which will be touched on in the examples. So when are all these changes happening? We do have a roadmap for all the changes on our website. To be honest, rather than looking at all the text on this slide, I'll try to explain it like this and hopefully kind of keep it simple as I can. If you order new edition textbooks and practice books, which you can do now, by the way, they're available, they would arrive in the holidays or when the school opens in time for the new term. So the term A textbooks and practice books would arrive by September, term B by January, term C by April. So in time for the 22-23 academic year. Teacher guide hard copy books will be published next summer. So you can't use those hard copies in 22-23. But of course, the teacher guide content is available online. So the digital content for the new editions, all the digital content will be available in Active Learn before the books. So the term A digital content for the new editions will be added to Active Learn in July, term B in December, term C in March. So in advance of when you need it for teaching. So looking at my next slide here, all of this means that it is possible to use the new editions of Power Maths from September. Of course, it is a choice. So you can use the new materials. You can continue to use the current Power Maths resources. No problem with that at all. So I hope that 10 minutes or so, I hope that gives you a general picture of what we're doing and why. And now I'm going to hand over to Tony to talk us through some of the examples that he's picked out. He knows the resources very well and has picked out some good examples of some of the things that I've mentioned that he can explain in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Simon. So nice to meet everybody. So I just want to go through then a few things about the new version of Power Maths and a bit of the why. So I know I've worked with many schools who have been using Power Maths and heard things that they like and things that they'd like to improve. And so I'm hoping that this second edition, aligned with White Rose, it responds to a lot of that feedback. So it was 4 years since first edition of Power Maths, nearly 5 years now, 2017 when the first edition was out there, and we've clearly had the pandemic since then. We've had a lot of guidance from the DFE, NCTM, okay, and the Ready to Progress guidance, and also we've had the biggest factor in terms of improving, making changes to Power Maths has been really the feedback from you as Power Maths users in schools. So all that we've taken into account, and also because of my role as well at White Rose, we've had similar feedback there, and we've able to collectively put all that feedback together and hopefully come up with an improved progression, and also improved textbooks and workbooks as well. And I'll go through the detail of what's changing. So if you just click on Simon a second, just so the image comes up. Apologies. So if you've not seen, hopefully the image will come up.
Sorry to be a bit slow. I was just looking at the chat and stuff.
So you may have seen the updated progression from White Rose. Essentially, our plan is the plan for the Power Maths is to follow those progressions. So you will see that it's exactly the same order. So where White Rose have changed the order, that's been changed in Power Maths. So it absolutely perfectly aligns. I'll come on to answer some of the questions about which book you're using, etc. towards the end. I promise. I can see some of those have popped up earlier, so I'll come on to that. But essentially, the key message I want to say is that the overviews for Power Maths will match the overviews for White Rose. So where we've added time and content, etc., we've also done the same. To Power Maths. So, and then Simon talks about the mixed alignment for mixed age. So on the next slide, you'll see what that means. Okay, so you'll see how that's changed for mixed age. So what a lot of the questions we got both with Power Maths and both with White Rose is really we'd like to ideally be teaching the same content at the same time. And we've improved that. So it's not perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect. It's always difficult to get it perfect, but as close as possible, we've tried to align it so that teachers then can make those flexible decisions with their class or their mixed age classes to try and align the content. So those are the key changes to progression. Progression is being changed to really make sure that you can get the most out of really the books and everything else, because We know from Ready to Progress that they want, the DFE and NCTM want a greater focus on particular topics. So what we've done is we put more time. We know things like that Power Math users said that in year 1, they didn't want to do adding within 20 by making 10. And so alongside White Rose, that's all being moved to year 2 now, because that was a much more difficult concept. So what we've done is we've spent longer and gone deeper on the teen numbers, for example, and really helped children understand those teen numbers, because that was one of the biggest bit of feedbacks we had. And the other thing that we've done that I think you should bear in mind is that we've stripped back a lot of the non-statutory content. So speaking to a lot of schools in the first edition of Power Maths, we put in a lot of the non-stat guidance. So we went a lot further than actually schools needed to go. So we've stripped a lot of that back and only kept key things in which we feel schools may want to cover, and that is completely based on feedback from Power Maths schools. So I think Key Stage 1 will notice the biggest difference, okay, and you'll see some examples very shortly. So moving on then, these are 7 steps from the old progression. So this was year 3 fractions. So I'm taking some examples of potentially where changes are being made. So year 3 fractions is a big change. So NCTM, DFE are really saying that fractions, children in year 3 is where they should get their real understanding of fractions. So we know it appears in year 1 and 2 in the statutory national curriculum, but really year 3 is probably where you want to really think about maybe going back to the basics again and recovering it. And I'm conscious that in the current Power Maths that it might go a bit too quick, and that's been a feedback at White Rose as well, that unit just goes a bit too quick. So that's how it looks currently on one of the fractions set of steps. So this is what it's going to turn into in the next slide. So you'll see that we've taken those steps, and you'll see that really we've gone into a lot more detail. So really children are starting to understand what the denominator of a unit fraction is. They're then able to compare and order unit fractions because of that understanding that they had in lesson 1. Then they'll understand the numerator, understand the whole, etc., etc. So we've really taken those 7 lessons, and we've turned that into 10. Now you might be thinking, well, I already don't have enough time to fit it in. There are other things that we've either cut short, like we've got rid of some things because previously they were in the non-statutory guidance. So there's not a vast greater number of lessons at all. So I just want to stress that it's just we're using time more effectively, and we're focusing on the key topics that NCTM, DFE are asking to be focused on. So that's one of the biggest differences you will see. So on the next slide, then you will start to see really some of the changes. So some of the big changes that we've made. Firstly, we've tried to reduce the cognitive load on pages to make them clearer. So we know some people like lots of models and images on a page, okay? So we know that some schools working with their children like to have lots of different models and images, and if the current number of images and models really works for you, then you might want to continue to use those. But however, the biggest bit of feedback, particularly at Key Stage 1, has been that there's just too many models and images for the children. So you'll notice there's an example of the new and the original where we've really stripped that back significantly. So in other words, it should be clearer. Clearly, this is one that you've been reading with children, etc. We have cut down as well the reading, which you'll see in a second. We've cut down the amount of reading that children need to do, particularly in Key Stage 1, but we've tried to make it a lot clearer and a lot simpler for children, particularly in the independent practice, to be able to do. So that is, I think, when you see on Active Learn, if you take a look on Active Learn when the new content is released, I think you will see huge change there, and it'll feel a lot friendlier. It'll feel a lot cleaner when you see it. So, but still, those characters remain that drive the mindset, etc. So, moving on to the next one. Oh, I think we've got a couple examples there just to show you. So this just gives a couple examples of what potentially the new share content looks like, because I know share content was something that people said, oh, there's just too much and I have to clip it, etc. But this is the new share content. So 10Q, and this is counting this is counting from a larger group, which is a new step. So I think the share is take 10 cubes, and then the discover task is about taking 10 cubes, and then it's about counting 4 from the 10. So you can see hopefully from those pages how the new addition, which you'll have access to on Active Learn, is much clearer and should be much simpler for children cognitively. So that's big change number 1. Moving on. So, just to give some examples of how Key Stage 2 has changed. So this is an example from Year 4. So again, you can see there was a lot more on this page originally, but you can see how we've just stripped it back to the key content, and rather than maybe focusing on 2 or 3 different methods, we've tried to focus on one. So essentially this is just simplifying it, and then you can see hopefully there how the pages just are a bit much clearer. So moving on to the next one. So next, what we've got then is the practice book. So again, practice books have been changed. Okay, so one of the things that people asked us to do is there are too many boxes for children to fill in. I know that some of you really like the boxes to fill in, so we've tried to come up with a balance between, because the boxes help structure the learning, but equally we know sometimes it's not necessary to have the boxes because you might want children to use their own method. So in the practice books, we've tried to give more freedom, particularly as you move into Key Stage 2, more freedom for children to use their own methods. Okay, so children can select their methods, and they are much cleaner, really. And you'll notice as well that we've added square paper background for column calculations, or where children are going to make calculations. There should be some backgrounds to those, because this is something we wrote about a month ago. So there will be also squared columns on the thousands, hundreds, tens and ones setup as well. So just to show you some of the changes that are being made. So hopefully you can see that they're much clearer, so children can go straight into it a bit quicker as well. So that's what a bit more practice. So we'll take a bit more, look at some more practice now, Simon, if that's all right on the next slide. So again, here's an example of Key Stage 1 again. So you'll see that we've tried to make it as clear as possible. So colour 3 trees, colour 7 umbrellas, colour 2 apples, colour 5 apples. So again, this is a page that has tried to be reduced in complexity. We know one of the things that people didn't like, okay, is that I know some did, so we've removed some of the inline artwork, so where it says, because I think that's occasionally confused some children, so we've tried to again strip that back so that to try and make it clear to understand. And then next to it you've got another example from Year 4, which is comparing Orbis number to 10,000. Again, there's just more fluency based content, because I think what users were telling us is that they wanted children to feel, and this is the same at White Rose as well, it's the same message we got at White Rose, is they wanted more fluency-based practice early on in the lesson to build children's confidence. So you've still got those reason and problem-solving questions, but what we've done is we've just stripped them back a tiny bit, rather than trying to have an equal balance, is that we've just increased the percentage of fluency-based questions, and hopefully when you see the new content, you'll feel, yeah, oh, that's for those that wanted more fluency. I'm hoping that you'll feel really happy about that. But there is still that reason and problem solving content there, but we've given you just more fluency. Next one, Simon, sorry. We've again, these might seem minor, but they're really important. Again, based on a lot of feedback, okay, is we've made those accessibility improvements, right, to make it easy for children to engage with both the digital and print materials. So you can see how that's just, so the question hasn't changed, well, we've reduced the content in terms of wording, but essentially we've just made those bananas and cherries a bit clearer so children can see them, again, completely based on feedback that we've received. Next page. So one of the other things that's been added, and again, these will be in Active Learn and so freely available, is one of the other things that's a bit that some people use and some people don't, is the power-ups. So the power-ups remain, and if you use power-ups effectively, that's great. What a lot of teachers were telling me when I visited schools is they said they'd really like just maybe a bit of a quick recap, something that, you know, what's the prerequisite knowledge or skill, or what do they need to be able to do in this lesson before they move on to that lesson, before they move on to the current lesson. So one of the things, so here's just a very quick recap in the teacher guide now, which basically says, check children already know how to use the less than and greater than symbols, really. So to compare smaller numbers. So it's a very, very quick check, so that you as a teacher spend 2 or 3 minutes, instead of doing the power up, really, you just do, you know what, we're going to order numbers with 4 or 5 digits. I just want to make sure they understand how to use the symbols before we do those larger numbers. So in other words, it's just making sure that they've got that prerequisite knowledge. And then if they don't have that prerequisite knowledge, as a teacher, you're going to have to think about the decision that you need to make in order, do I need to maybe spend a tiny bit of time then focusing on that? Or when I'm teaching a lesson, I know I need to focus a bit more on that. So that for me is something that we know a lot of you wanted. And so we've tried to give that just as a quick activity, or a quick something for you to use potentially to give children that to make sure children have got that prerequisite knowledge. And I should say, this is we feel that this is an alternative to power-ups. Feel free to use power-ups somewhere else, but we feel it's either power-ups or this. So it could be a flexible choice, and it doesn't have to be the same every lesson if you use power-up one lesson or the quick recap, but we wouldn't recommend using both. Next slide, Simon, please. So using White Rose, I know a lot of you will be using the White Rose curriculum and following the White Rose curriculum, and clearly you're on here hopefully as well because you're using Power Maths. And I want to say a couple of things about this. So they have been designed to work together. Okay, they at the heart, they've been very much designed to work together. There is much closer alignment with the new version, with the White Rose Master version of Power Maths than the previous one, but they were still close to the previous one, but they're even closer now, right? What White Rose doesn't provide, and isn't going to provide going forward, is that lesson structure and that example content. Right? So, well, it's got some example content, but it doesn't give you that lesson structure. If what essentially Power Maths is, it gives you a structure for which to follow. Okay, so you start with that generating that curiosity and the discover task. You then share the ideas as a class, etc., etc. Then you work through some worked examples in the think together, and then children should hopefully be ready for independent practice. So what Power Maths does is give you that structure that maybe White Rose leaves open to a bit more interpretation. Now, going around, I know different schools use things in different ways. So I know what sometimes some schools do is they sometimes use a couple of the examples for White Rose to supplement the Power Maths, and equally the other way. So I'd see I see Power Maths as very much giving you lots of ideas to teach a lot of the White Rose steps. So it's also giving you that structure. Clearly, the Power Maths, I know White Rose, we do the worksheets, but Power Maths gives you that workbook to fit alongside. Models and images are even more closely aligned, and you can always use the Power. And we know some schools who use the White Rose worksheets as homework or as additional learning and supplement it. So depends. Different schools use it in different ways, but the main point I'm making is, if you're a school thinking about, well, why would I need Power Maths if I've got White Rose, is that I feel a good use of it is if you don't have that lesson structure, or you want a lesson structure to follow that all your teachers can follow, and Power Maths gives you that. And I think the new editions are even refine it even more. So hopefully you will see that when you see the example content. So I think I've covered everything there, Simon. Is that right? Is that over to you?
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I think you have. See what happens when I click on. I think that'll be me again. Just going to minimize a couple of the chat. I'll try and answer some of these things that have come up, but I'll talk about this first. So deciding what's best for your school, then using the new editions from next term, or maybe sticking with the current books for the time being. Just a reminder that for the new editions, calling them the White Rose Maths editions of Power Maths, you can get the textbooks and practice books in time, not much in advance of each term, but in time for each term in the next academic year. You'll have the digital content automatically. You don't need to do anything. If you're a Power Maths user or an active learner, you don't have to do anything different. You'll get the digital content. You won't have hard copies of the teacher guides until the following academic year, but you will have the digital copies in time for teaching each term. So yes, the thing that I need to say, which has come up in the chat, and maybe should have said earlier, is that applies to schools in the UK in terms of when everything will reach your school. If you're an international school, it's more a case of looking at the digital content and seeing what's coming down the track, and then these are books that you could be buying for the following year. So we wouldn't be able to get them delivered in time all around the world. So that ability to choose to use the books this September, that is as a UK choice, I'm afraid, rather than an international choice. Right, so which version to choose, what to do in September. I've got a few, I think the main variables I picked out between different schools just to help think through this. So, okay, have you already decided that you want to follow the White Rose Maths new schemes of learning? That, of course, would be a reason to use the new Power Maths books, which are aligned with those. But I imagine that lots of schools, if you are using White Rose materials, will be sticking with the White Rose schemes that they know for the time being. And of course, those are aligned with the current Power Maths. So which version of the White Rose schemes might be a factor? How familiar are you with Power Maths? How familiar are your staff with Power Maths? How would they react to the change? Are they comfortable with what they know? Are they still getting to grips with Power Maths? Perhaps it's better not to make a sudden change if they are still getting to grips with it. You can always consider it in a year's time. For a school starting with Power Maths now, right now, it probably would make sense to use the new materials, but I know that's not most of you on the call. Okay, I think preparation time is a point. How much do you value having that preparation time with the physical books? Because it will be a bit more of a rush with the new editions. I mean, you just won't have them as far in advance. So would you know, is that a reason that you would rather do it later, or are you fine with that? Would you miss having the hard copies of the teacher guides? So I was just noticing in the chat somebody commenting on that. So it is just a factor to consider about, because obviously if you were to switch to using the new editions in a year's time, this isn't an issue. You can use the hard copy teacher guides. So if for instance you operate by a lot of printing of what's in the online, you know, and you'd like to have the hard copy, then that might not work as well for you. But I'm not sure. I'm sure people operate quite differently in terms of reading from digital, reading the hard copies. By the way, actually, that maybe draws me onto the progress test. So some of you will be using the progress test, and you can use them with the new editions, but it will involve a little bit of tweaking, potentially leaving out a question here or there. Maybe so in some cases doing the tests a week or two later than you would have done. We'll provide some details on that to explain how you would do it, but that's something that will be fully joined up ahead of next September, and that might be a factor for some of you. Similarly, some of you will have copies of the textbooks that you're happy with, you'd just rather keep using them, and that might be a factor for you as well. The last one I've got on there is mixed age. I hope you don't feel I'm leaving you till last. I mean, I am, but only because the thing is that all of the above is equally relevant to mixed age. Those are also factors for you as well. So what's different for mixed age? Well, as Tony's shown, if you want to use the new additions, the closer alignment should mean that you can teach the groups within your class all together a bit more often, particularly if it's a year 1-2 group or a year 3-4 or a year 5 and 6 group. So in terms of advice on how to do mixed age teaching with the new edition, the mixed age webinar, which we recorded and you can still watch, so that is still relevant in terms of your options for handling mixed age teaching with the new editions. You can still use the mixed age planning lesson exemplars as a guide for managing the groups in your class. So if you look on the planning page in Active Learn and look at the mixed age planning lesson exemplars, those will still apply as a way of structuring your mixed age lesson with the new edition. I would say that potentially the overviews that we've done, because they're kind of connected with the progression, the mixed age overviews might be less kind of applicable to the new edition, but the lesson exemplars are still very much applicable. So for mixed age teachers then, as for everybody else, it's just a choice for you to make. And well, I guess for mixed age teachers, you may be feeling if what you're doing is working for mixed age, you might be a little bit more cautious about changing it. I don't know, but of course you can decide not to make a change. I hope that's useful. I know you probably wouldn't want me to be trying to say, this is what everybody should do. So hopefully it's good to think through some of the factors that are different for different schools. I think we're at the point then, I might just look at questions I've spotted coming in at this point, just before we do the poll, see whether there's anything here that I could just answer. So I've said something about international. I think somebody in the chat asked a question about mixing editions effectively. It's sort of saying, can I use new practice books with old textbooks? Or it may not have been that way round, but I think on the whole, the differences are not radical, enormous, but they're not totally trivial either. So I think that that's best avoided. You have the option, obviously, you'll have the digital content for both editions. So the best thing to do is just to have all the books for the same edition that match up.
Simon,
yes.
Can I just add a couple of things to that? Is that all right? Just a couple comments, because I know that's a question I've had a couple of times. So I think that depends. I think that question depends on how you use the books and how you use the online content and how you use the textbooks, because we know some schools don't utilize the textbooks every lesson. So what you will notice when you see the new editions is that some of the units are not changing significantly. So there's big changes to some units, and so it would be hard, as Simon said, but there's some that's not. So I think if you're a school that dips in and out of the textbook and uses the online content more, then it's potentially possible that you could do that, but you'd have to make that assessment yourself once you'd looked at the new content, really. But that just might be, I think, if you're a school that uses the textbook all the time and it's out on the desk, which is clearly what we encourage, and etc., then as Simon said, it probably would be difficult, and you'd be better with the same edition for both. But I think it depends on that. And Simon, the other thing I wanted to, which I meant to mention, because I know a couple of people have asked it, is that I know a lot of people struggle to get through all of the content. It's exactly the same with White Rose as well. I'm hoping that when you see the new lesson content, that those lessons that have been fed back to us, and we've had thousands of bits of feedback on particular lessons, and we're hoping that those have been as well shortened down. So you'll notice that the Discover section, particularly in a lot of well, not a lot of places, in a few places, a bit more direct and a bit clearer. And instead of having 2 questions, we've still got 2 questions, but we actually just used the last question 1. And we've broken it into 2 parts. So because the feedback is that trying to get through the entire content of that lesson was proving difficult. So where we've had feedback around that, and when we've reflected on it, it might be a bit too ambitious. We have cut that back as well. So hopefully when you see the new edition as well, you'll notice that change. And Simon, you probably mentioned this, but I'll mention it because I'll forget it. is that we are planning to do a series of a couple more webinars this term as well around getting the best out of Power Maths. And also, if you're a non-user of Power Maths at the moment and you're really interested, because it gives your schools a structure and textbooks, etc., we plan to do sessions on both of those things later on this term. So look out for those, which will have more information on those.
Thanks, Tony. Somebody was asking if the lesson still begins with a problem in context in the way that it did before, and it does. The structure of the Power Maths lesson is will be familiar. It's the same. Tony mentioned the choice you have around quick recap if you're not using the power ups, for instance. But it's the same lesson structure. Somebody else asked a question about buying the current editions of the practice books. Yes, absolutely, you can still do that. And in terms of somebody else asked a question about how long we would keep supporting that, and I think that's already been answered, that for the foreseeable it'll be good for us just to understand what people want, and and what people are choosing, which versions people are choosing to go with. There was a question about early years, and it might have been answered, but I should have said probably the new editions, it's changes to year 1 to 6. We already changed updated reception in light of the updated EYFS framework. So we already changed that, and we feel that it's joined up. These changes or apply to year 1 to 6. You can still keep using the same reception materials that you have been using, because we've already updated those. Somebody asked a question. I've hopefully written down their initials, but that you've just had books delivered, and so you're wondering about your options for that. I think that you should just reach out to our customer success team or the partnership manager that you were dealing with and just discuss it, because it may be that you're going to just use the books that you've ordered, or it may be that you want to have a conversation with us about that, which is fine. Tony, can I put you on the spot with a question about NCETM? Would that be okay? So I think somebody, so I said, and I think you said, that we factored in lots of guidance that's come from NCETM and so on. And then I think somebody has asked a specific question about, okay, so how does our new edition align with the whether it was the curriculum maps from NCETM or the spines? So I think that the answer is that it doesn't mean that we've just made Power Maths match the spines or the curriculum maps. It doesn't do that exactly, but you might be able to say a little bit more kind of how we factored that in, and why Power Maths and White Rose Maths, of course, are different.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Simon. So 2 ways. Firstly, one that we've already mentioned is around Ready to Progress. So we, DFE, working with NCETM, identified key topics that they wanted children to really grasp before they moved on, and so into the next year group. So we have spent, and this is the same in the White Rose scheme, we have spent longer and gone into a bit more depth on those topics. So that's one big change. And then the other one, how else we've used it, is we have taken into account the spine, because we know there are schools who are using the NCETM materials alongside other materials really for those lessons. And although it's not an alignment to the spine in any way, there are some, you'll notice some things that we have done, okay, particularly in things like addition and also in fractions, where we've tried to, some of the headings and things match up a bit more. So it's not an alignment to the spine, it's very much alignment to White Rose, but all those materials have been taken into account alongside it. So I know a lot of the spine materials goes a bit slower and at times, and hopefully certain units in Power Maths you'll notice where we've done that. And I'm hoping the changes that we've made really reflect what a lot of people were saying about the Power Maths and about White Rose. So like addition and subtraction in year 3, I think there's fractions in year 5 needed splitting up. So all those things that I think people were saying, look, this would be good if, then we've done that. But equally, if you were happy with it and your school's happy with it, just like the White Rose, stick with it. It's absolutely fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, and maybe dip into the other content if needed at any point if you want a bit more support. Anything else?
Thanks, Tony. Joe, would it be okay to launch the poll at this point and ask everybody what they plan to do? So I hope that the information's been clear today. So this poll is going to give us a picture of how many schools, you know, we need to support with each edition in the coming academic year. If you don't know which you'll use, that's fine. You can put undecided, obviously. If you're leaning one way or the other, I would just say nobody's holding you to your answer here. This isn't you kind of committing yourself. So it's just information for us. So if you're leaning one way or the other, that's probably good to see. Cool. I'll give you all a moment to do that because I think there's a couple of questions in there, isn't there? And just glance at the questions and to see whether there's any more that we could be answering. Okay, see what we can pick up here in terms of questions. I think one or two people have asked about assessment, and it is our intention to make updates to the progress test. It's just a year away. Carla, you've asked, will the books be sent automatically, or do we need to remember to order them at the end of each term? I think if you order the books now, they will be delivered when they are published. So if you order terms B and C, for instance, you shouldn't need to remind anybody that you've ordered them. They should just arrive. Somebody else is saying, Victoria, we had a quote for the original package. Would it be the same for the new versions and the updates? The prices of the components are the same, so I think it would. Will the current book work? Will the current books work with the new digital content? Is what Tony was saying about using different editions. But if you've got the current books, you'll still have the same digital content that you've got now. We won't take that away. So you'll have digital content for the new version and digital for the new version. So you will be able to use the digital and the books together, whatever.
Simon, some people ask when sample copies might be available. I know yeah, I don't know if that's something.
Yeah, good question, because I think one of the things that we've done before with Power Maths is we had a sample book that shows a lesson from each year group, and we had that out, and it would take us a little bit longer to produce that for the new edition. But what I thought we might be able to do is to put the first textbook and practice book that's available up on Active Learn for people to see. So I'm hoping that 4A, which is, we've got at least a version of that that's basic, pretty much finished. I think we could put that up, I'm hoping, within the next couple of weeks, so I've been trying to do that, so I'll have to update on that. But I think that would be a good way of showing an example. rather than like the sample that we had before. It would be a sample of what the new materials look like. There was a question about year 6 and whether you would need the term C materials earlier because you kind of cover the content earlier. I have to take that one away and think that if we were prioritizing trying to get the year 6 materials earlier, you know, how much earlier could we get them? So I'm afraid I don't have an immediate answer to that one. So potentially we might be able to do it a bit earlier than the other year groups, but probably not massively. So I'll have to think about that one. Anything else? I can see now, I'm scrolling down the chat so I can see some of the ones I've been answering have already been answered, but thank you to the people that have been answering questions in the chat. So I would take it that everybody's had a chance to do the poll. So it'd probably be a bit tedious for you watching me read through all, because there's quite a lot in the chat and we can answer it later. So is there anything that any of the other panelists think that we ought to be answering? Yeah, Simon, one about the mixed age and the fact that, somebody said, will you jump about the books now? Because so the answer should be no now, because actually those have been aligned, so you won't need to jump about the books anymore if you're a mixed age teacher. So because unless clearly you look at the overviews and you decide you want to teach something in a different place, then you would. But no, there shouldn't be any need for that to happen with a new alignment. Really, that's the same with the White Rose as well. So yeah, there shouldn't be a need to do that. Is there a kind of, if you're a year 2-3 teacher, something like that, would we still say? Yeah, clearly, if again there is better alignment across the year groups where there's not as much. So 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. There is still alignment. It's not fully perfect, but there is a greater alignment there as well. Yeah. But definitely for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it should be aligned. Great, thank you very much. Just quickly, anything else that anybody feels that we should or could answer straight away, or should we look through these and get back to everybody later? Yeah, I think there's some questions that probably, I think it'd be good to put a Q&A out at some point in the next week, really. But yeah, I think really, and I know there are some ideas on there, like around editable and things like this that are desires and things that people want, and I think that is something definitely that we can add to a list of things as a desirable to think in terms of a roadmap and everything else for developing Power Maths. So absolutely, I think I promise all the ideas are listened to, and we will they're always really useful because it helps us steer where we're going. I should have said right at the beginning, probably, that, somebody did say the session is being recorded, so that means you can watch it back. So once we have the recording of today, we will do a latest news post on Active Learn to show where you can get it. We'll post it in the Facebook group if you go in there. We'll email it, I expect, to our list of opted-in schools, so you should join that if you want to. That's that, and as Tony says, we'll get back to you with further answer to questions. So thank you very much, Tony. Huge thank you to you for helping with this and for all the detail, which I think is really valuable. Thanks to everybody for attending. Really good turnout, and I can see, most people are still here. So thank you very much for bearing with us. Thank you. Enjoy your evening, and goodbye for now.